So if we don't buy the moral argument, then what's left? So another argument that we might think of here is what's called Pascal's wager. So this is an argument that's been devised by a philosopher called Blaise Pascal. Um, and instead of kind of arguing directly for the afterlife with evidence, Pascal is doing something slightly different. So he's kind of aiming to suggest that we should rationally believe in the afterlife based on the expected value of our belief. And what that means will kind of become a bit clearer in a second as I go through the argument. So Pascal's wager, it's worth noting, isn't typically understood as an argument for the idea that there's life after death, but instead it's typically given as an argument for believing in God. But I believe that it can kind of be adapted for our purposes. As I said, a lot of these questions are kind of going hand in hand with each other. So I'm going to present to you a version of Pascal's wager that's to do with believing in the afterlife, believing in life after death. So Pascal wants to say that it's either the case that the afterlife exists or it does not exist. So it's going to be one of these two options. And he says that if the afterlife exists, it's an open question. What would it be rational for us to do? So we get these two options here, which is, you believe in the afterlife and the afterlife exists. So if that's the case, and we take, for example, the Christian conception of heaven, you're going to act as if the afterlife exists, and that action is going to be useful in helping you get into the afterlife. So you get this kind of infinite reward, eternal happiness. By contrast, if the afterlife does not exist, if you do not believe that the afterlife exists, and it does, then you get eternal damnation. So you haven't acted properly on the assumption that there is an afterlife, which means that you're going to be much less likely to enter the good afterlife and instead go to the bad afterlife. And that seems really bad. This is kind of infinitely bad. On the other hand, we have this other option, which is, the afterlife doesn't really exist. And so if you believe in the afterlife, if you, act as if the afterlife is true, there is life after death, then nothing really matters. Maybe you waste a bit of time that you could have spent doing other stuff, but ultimately this is kind of, a drop in the ocean in terms of the effort that you've expended across your life. So you don't really lose anything if there is no afterlife and you've acted as if there is throughout all your life, much less because, if there is no afterlife and you get to that point, there is no you around anymore to kind of care about having wasted your time. And then the last option is, you act as if there is an afterlife and there is an afterlife. And again, you don't really gain anything, you don't really lose anything. So given this, Pascal says that the rational thing for you to do, if you're, uncertain about whether or not there's an afterlife, we should act as if the afterlife exists, because that's going to be the option that kind of guarantees us the best results, even if we're uncertain. So we should believe that the afterlife exists, because if we're right, then we get to kind of go to heaven because we've acted as if the afterlife exists. Versus if we're wrong, we don't really lose anything. Maybe we waste a bit of time. But if we don't believe that the afterlife exists, and it does, then it seems like results are going to be really bad for us. And if we don't, and there is no afterlife, then again, we don't really gain anything. So all the options point towards the idea that we should believe in the afterlife, even if we're not sure about what the evidence says, because believing in the afterlife is always going to be better for us than not.